a voice that we've been waiting to hear, especially on all things Trump, US markets, Indian markets. I mean, the gamut is wide. Ramesh Damani, very good morning. I know you've given us just 15 minutes and we'll try and pack in as much as we can this morning, but always a pleasure to speak with you, sir.
Good morning, Tamanna. Thank you for having me.
Only because we spoke so much before the election, I have to start by asking you, is this worse than anything that you expected in terms of what Trump would do?
I think, Tamanna, sometimes you just run off of expletives and expressions to explain what has been going on. And I've reached that point, I think. I think America itself is fast approaching what I call the Liz Truss moment, when Liz Truss did a unpopular set of economic policies and the markets forced her to resign and reverse course. And while I don't think Trump is about to resign, in fact, the US presidency doesn't allow that, I think at some point or the other, the markets will force a rethink in the White House of what has been done. But I've never seen in my life such kind of economic vandalism by the leader of the free world, It happens in, dictatorship, tin pot countries. I had never believed it could have happened in America, but as we speak, it's happening and unfolding in America.
Almost seems we're talking about protection money, and the approach seems to be, at least from my perspective, similar. I don't know what you think about that, but if we're talking about, Ramesh, hi, good morning, Alex here. But if you're talking about Donald Trump having written The Art of the Deal, many, many years back, this guy called Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War. And you're talking about a situation where essentially we're talking about the China may not just blink. So you're talking about 104% tariffs that could kick in, and China say, do what you got to do, we'll see what happens.
I mean, it makes no sense, Alex. I mean, I don't know how to even begin to explain it. I would never have believed that in any confrontation in the world, I would take the Chinese side as opposed to the American side. And yet that's happening. I think before our eyes, I think what Trump wants to do is he wants to prove, that it's no longer a nanny state, but a daddy state, and that he wants to dole out favors and do crony capitalism to people. If you support me, I'll waive your tariffs for you. If you support me, I'll protect you. I mean, what you said in the initial monologue of this protection money, I think that's what he's doing to NATO. I mean, the most secure alliance that has kept the world so peace and prosperous for the last 75 years is being dismantled because Trump is essentially saying, pay me more money or I won't protect you, which is beneath the level of a US presidency to ask for hafta protection money. But he's doing that, whether it's USAID, whether it's FDA, institution after institution that made America great is being dismantled before our very eyes. So I have to believe that at some point, economic markets will cause him huge pain, and he will have to rethink it, though right now it doesn't seem possible, but I think ultimately markets have a sense of prevailing. I think the pain on Main Street will be so enormous that he will be forced to rethink.
Mr. Damani, good morning. Neeraj here. For long, we've been used to this term of when the US sneezes, the world catches cold, be it markets or be it the economy. Can the next 12 months to 18 months, if this continues, be different in that the US may sneeze or actually catch a cold as well, and others like India or some others might be relatively unscathed?
I think that's normally very true that the US was the dominant market, and as you said, if it sneezes, everyone caught the flu. But given what America is going through and the trajectory that Trump is likely to be in power for the next 4 years and pursue these, what I would call benignly wrong-headed policies, the world will have to move on. They'll form new trading blocs. One of the soft parts of America is what they call the SWIFT trading system, where checks are cleared inter-country. I think that has already been done by China at a fraction of the cost and faster speed than SWIFT is. A lot of trading that used to take place between, say, US and China and US and other countries now be rerouted to other countries of the world. So I have to think that the world will not sit down and take it lying down, that the new alliance will be formed, new strategies will evolve, where there'll be regional trading blocs, where there'll be Europe and India. I have to think that the world will not go to hell in a handbasket, that cooler heads will prevail. And if the US wants to be left behind, it will be left behind. The number that we used to pay most attention to in the stock market a few years back was the FI number. But gradually that has become more important as the domestic flows than the foreign flows. And while it's an important number, it's no longer the most important number. Similarly, the market that we all look up in the morning when we get up was the Dow Jones. But I think increasingly people will look at European markets, look at Chinese market, look at the Nikkei market, and the US market relevance will go down. It's not that America is going left or right. America is turning inward. You know, as they say, it's not make America great again. It's make America regressive again, or Mara, to use an Indian pun. So, you know, I think I am willing to bet at this point that India and the rest of the emerging market basket that are large economies invert their own strengths will not follow the American way, and that at some point there will be some escape velocity for our economies.
You know, at this point, a lot of people watching this program want to know, what do I do? What do I do with my investments? What do I do with the faith? And you're talking about domestic investors and the number that we now watch, Mr. Damani. What do you do with your SIPs? What do you do with your portfolio? As you know, it just is tossing and turning among this volatility.
Yeah, I mean, the good news from anecdotally talking to a lot of friends, brokers, investors, is that they are keeping the faith. They are not necessarily panicking at these sharp reversals and getting out, which is a good sign for India. I think what markets have taught me is that if you're finding value in a particular business, I think you ride out the volatility. We've often said there's a difference between volatility and risk. Volatility is what we're going through right now, Tamanna. Risk is if you can permanently lose capital. I don't think we've reached the stage yet. I think two things will happen, that India and other emerging markets who have large domestic facing economies will move on. And at some point, it might not happen tomorrow, it might happen 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. I'm willing to stick my neck out and say America will reverse course. This cannot happen. I think, as I've given a famous example, when the SS Titanic hit the iceberg, it's the iceberg that won. And America is now the SS Titanic. And no matter how big and impregnable it is, at some point, economic reality will have to prevail, that you will have a higher level of inflation in America, less confidence, less investment, less trust. The presidency and the public pressure of markets and public pressure in America itself will almost force him to reverse course. So my suggestion to your question is to investors, look for that companies that benefit from this environment, that are inward looking, and stay the course. I think there is nothing going on in India that would suggest that we panic at this point. I mean, in America, if I was a member of the Dow Jones or watching American markets, I think it's still time to panic based on what's going on there. Fortunately, for whatever it's worth, I believe that we will land on our feet.
And it's great to hear you say that, Ramesh. I think a lot of people will take heart from that. As we're speaking, as we began speaking, US tariffs came into effect, and you have bond yields, and you've probably not seen your screen. I don't know if your terminal's in front of you, but bond yields in the US have spiked quite alarmingly. And we were talking about it this morning, the fact that Donald Trump has been watching those long yields, and what you're seeing might actually play out, because ultimately, I guess his intention is to bring down borrowing and bring down the debt, and that cost of borrowing going up is not going to be a pretty pill for him to swallow. So assuming that that does unwind in 2 months' time and crude goes back up, is that the biggest headwind for us? Because we're talking about inflation here as well. We're speaking just ahead of a monetary policy where we're widely expected to see rate cuts.
Yeah, I think India can handle crude at about $65, $70 a barrel. I think it obviously helps us if crude goes down, but we are pretty comfortable with $65, $70. That seems like a good clearing price for the Indian economy. I think the more, is he going to turn attention next to the services export? I mean, I think what America or what Trump doesn't realize is that every day we wake up in the morning across the world and use Google, use Facebook, use Meta, use artificial intelligence, all products that America has given the world. I mean, why aren't we talking about that? He talks very narrowly about rape, pillage, and plunder, but Americans don't want those kind of jobs. That's the reason you can't make things efficiently and economically in America. That's why they moved on to other low wage countries, first to Japan, then to Korea, then to Singapore, now to Vietnam, India, and the other countries. So, it's just someone needs to read him the riot act and tell him that, do you really want Google not to sell its search engines in the world? Do you really want Facebook not to have friends in the world? I mean, it just, the trouble is that the American voters have created a situation where they've made Trump the emperor of America by giving him control of the House, the Senate, and the fact that he's already won against the impeachment. The Supreme Court is basically in his pocket, from what I can understand. And I think they will pay a price for this unbridled power given to America. And the price will ultimately be corrected when the financial markets send him a very strong and powerful message. And I don't think that is far away. I mean, I think what is happening is an economic mess in America. And I think sooner rather than later, there will be a rethink. I can't imagine a world without that rethink.
Got it. Mr. Damani, the other question is, assuming that this chaotic scenes continue for a lot longer, and we don't know how the tariff war will come in, but there are a lot of conspiracy theories, right, about American debt and it getting refinanced, so on and so forth, and all of that. I'm just trying to understand, are you trying to picturize or hypothesize how this picture will unfold, or is your best bet right now that things will change and therefore it might be not prudent to try and think of the worst case scenario currently?
I think things will change. I think I've heard these hypotheses, but they've all come after this fact that, the US has a huge amount of debt refinancing, so it wants lower interest rates. You can have lower interest rates and lower oil prices if you stop all economic activity. I mean, that's not the purpose. You don't want to burn the house in which you're living in order to accomplish what you're planning to do. And I personally don't believe Trump is that smart to think all these things through. I think what he wants to do is centralize power, Neeraj. He wants to, dole out favors to his cronies, saying, okay, I will give you protection, or I will give you a pardon in economic terms, or I'll make you a cabinet post that you want. He wants to centralize power. He's one of the more power-hungry presidents I've seen, who doesn't understand the gravitas of the position and the leader of the free world that the US president always is. So, I think given the fact that when the rubber meets the road, you will have to rethink your wrong-headed economic policies. You can't imagine a world where, the Chinese are, looked upon more favorably than the Americans are, which is what is happening even as we speak. So I think he will change. Markets will force him to change. I don't think any president can ignore public opinion for so long. So it will change. But in the meantime, we'll have to go through an enormous period of turmoil in the world. And like I mentioned in my introduction, I think America is going to have its Liz Truss moment. Liz Truss was forced in 4 weeks to change policy, and Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister of Great Britain because the policies were perceived as wrong-headed. I think the same thing is going to happen to Trump. He will not resign, but he'll be a much subdued man.
The Liz Truss moment. Let's wait and watch. As you were speaking, Mr. Damani, we saw pictures of the RBI governor walk in, and that's the next big event. Leads me to the question that what do you think we need to hear from policy makers? What will calm markets down, and how important is that messaging that comes in right now?
Tamanna, unfortunately, what will calm markets down is in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Nothing to do with what RBI governor does or Modi does. I think we're all, in effect, hostage to what happens in Washington and Wall Street at the current time. Unfortunately, there's very little. I mean, you could reduce interest rates, you could reduce oil prices, but there is panic and fear gripping the market, and that is not going to get solved in the short run without reassuring words from Washington.
Ramesh, one last question, right? I don't know how much attention that you're paying to this narrative that says that India is relatively better off compared to certain other countries, and seemingly 70 countries negotiating with Trump according to his last statement. But a lot of people taking heart that 26% tariffs, much lower than everything else, and certainly lower than 104%. Is there any bright spot that you're seeing in this?
It is, of course, it is, better relatively speaking, but, the whole basis for calculation, Alex, as so many analysts have said on television, is wrong. You cannot get to a situation where, forget the trade deficit, the deficit becomes zero between countries. It's silly. We have comparative advantages with each other. America needs more of what I make. so I will run a trade deficit with America. Other countries will run a surplus with America. I think if you wanted to take on China, for example, because you felt they were dumping products or using American markets unfavorably, you take on China, you don't take on the rest of the world along with it, and you don't come out with such, I'm a failure of words to describe it, policies that say in effect that I will get the deficit down to zero. You can have tariffs down to zero, you can have equal trading footing. How is it possible in a world of comparative advantage that deficits between countries will be zero? It's just not economically possible in my view. So there are, to come back to your question, bright spots in India. India is a large domestic facing economy. There are a lot of sectors that are not prone to exports that survive on, whether it's banking, whether it's airline, whether it's construction, whether it's real estate. So I think those are perhaps better bets to do. But my sense is we need to lower expectations of returns till dust settles in Washington.
And which is fair point too. But Mr. Damani, it'll be a pleasure at some point of time to do a slightly longer conversation around your experiences of America as it used to be and America that now is, and what implications does it hold for the modern world.
That'll be fun. I watched American presidency, the economy, for 75 years. And we are at a moment of unparalleled risk in the world. It's just unbelievable that a country that I worshipped at the altar, it was such a brilliant country, so generous, so forthcoming, so open. They taught us about economics. They taught us about free markets. They taught us about generosity. I'll just tell you, Neeraj, if you remember after World War II, when America won World War II, what they did was they took their own money, taxpayer money, and rebuilt Japan and Germany through the Marshall Plan. Can you ever imagine happening that? The reason Japan and Germany are so strong and a part of the Democratic Alliance is because of what President Truman did in 1948 and Eisenhower did in 1952. Despite vanquishing a very aggressive Japan and Germany, these guys went ahead and rebuilt those countries, and they became the bulwarks of American support.
True.
So, I'll end by saying this quote, which I'm very fond of saying for Trump. To quote Rudyard Kipling, what does he know of Britain who only Britain knows? What Kipling said. I will paraphrase that to mean, what does he know of America who only America knows? I think Trump knows the American electorate perhaps, but doesn't know the role and the standing of America in the world.
Mr. Damani, that conversation beckons at some point of time. I'm going to hear the great man in Omaha once I'm back, and if you are in India, would love to come down to your office and have that conversation with you.
We'll do that, Neeraj. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today.